The billionaire's dog led him to a girl who could not speak, but understood his pain. Comment, yes, if you want the next part. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, turning the forest into a maze of slick roots and dark branches. Most people would have stayed inside on a night like this, but Stephen Grayson had not slept properly in 7 years. Storms did not frighten him. Silence did. So he walked, hood pulled low, boots sinking into wet soil, and his dog Aster trotting steadily at his side. Stephen had come to the mountains to escape the noise of the world. The deals, the board meetings, the empty penthouse where his sister's laughter used to echo. He had thought isolation might offer peace, but the truth was heavier. The quieter the world became, the louder his grief sounded. That was why he walked at night. It was the only time his thoughts felt manageable. A branch cracked in the wind. Aster's ear shot up. Easy, boy, Stephen said, though he felt the tension in his own shoulders. Aster rarely startled. The Alaska Husky was trained for rescue and emotional alert work. If he sensed something, there was usually a reason. The dog sniffed the air and let out a low whine. Then he bolted. Aster! Stephen ran after him, breath cutting through the cold as the dog dashed off the main trail, weaving through pines as though pulled by an invisible thread. Stephen's flashlight jerked wildly with each step, catching rain, moss, then something pale. A figure curled on the ground. Aster was already there, circling, whining softly. Stephen dropped to his knees in the mud, heart pounding for reasons he could not name yet. The beam of the flashlight steadied enough to reveal a woman, soaked, trembling, hair long enough to reach her waist and heavy with rain. Her eyes opened when she sensed him. Wide, clear, alert despite the cold. Hey, Stephen said, voice softer than he expected. Can you hear me? She nodded. Slow, controlled, not panicked. She tried to speak, but the sound that came out was a thin breath, more air than voice. He realized instantly. She could not talk. Her hands moved toward him in a small, hesitant gesture, as if she needed help but did not want to startle him. Stephen removed his jacket without thinking, draping it over her shoulders. She was freezing. The tremor in her hands was unmistakable. I'm going to lift you up, he said. Just lean on me. I have you. She blinked once. A yes. When he slid an arm behind her back, he felt the sharp jolt of her flinch, not from pain, but from instinct. Fear of contact. Fear of strangers. Fear of something that ran deeper than the storm. It is all right, he added quietly. I am not here to hurt you. Aster nudged her knee as if offering reassurance. The woman's fingers moved to the dog's fur, trembling, but gentle. That simple touch softened something inside Stephen. Someone who trusted animals this quickly was not running from danger she created. She was running from a world that had taken too much already. As Stephen helped her sit up, her gaze locked with his. And for a brief second, it felt like she was reading something in him too. The exhaustion under his eyes, the grief he never spoke of, the loneliness that followed him like a shadow. No words. Yet somehow she understood. Thunder cracked overhead. The wind rose. Stephen glanced at the sky and then back at her. We cannot stay here, he said. Let me get you somewhere warm. Again, that slow, steady blink. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She clung lightly to his sleeve, not out of trust yet, but out of necessity. Aster trotted ahead, guiding the way as if this were exactly the path they needed to take. As they moved through the trees, Stephen felt a strange certainty settle over him. Meeting her did not feel like an accident. It felt like a door opening in a place he thought was locked forever. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew one thing already. Silence spoke volumes. And hers was saying something his heart had been desperate to hear. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. Stephen guided the young woman carefully through the winding forest trail, rain dripping from the branches like beads of cold glass. Aster stayed close, glancing back every few steps to make sure she was still walking. Her legs shook with each stride, but she kept moving with quiet, stubborn determination. She held his sleeve, not tightly, but just enough to steady herself. Stefan felt the tremor in her fingers and wondered how long she had been out in the storm. Her hair, long enough to reach her waist, clung to her back in heavy, wet waves. Every time the wind pushed against them, she drew in a shallow breath, almost like she had learned to inhale without sound. They reached the edge of Stefan's cabin, a modern structure built from timber and stone, tucked into the forest like it belonged there. Warm light glowed through the windows. For the first time that night, he saw her expression ease ever so slightly. Shelter meant safety, and she had the look of someone who had been without safety for far too long. Stefan opened the door and stepped aside. She hesitated on the threshold, eyes scanning the room as if checking for exits, shadows, or hidden dangers. Trauma had a way of sharpening instincts. Stefan did not rush her. He only nodded once, silently telling her that she could choose. Finally, she stepped inside. Aster shook off the rain and trotted toward the hearth, where a stack of firewood waited. Stefan helped the woman remove the soaked jacket he had draped over her earlier and guided her to a soft leather chair near the fireplace. The cabin's heat began to fill the air, melting the chill that clung to her skin. "Let me get you a blanket," Stefan said. He moved to a cedar chest, pulled out a heavy wool blanket, and settled it around her shoulders with gentle care. She watched his hands more than his face, as if touch and movement were languages she trusted more than words. When he handed her a warm mug of ginger tea, she cupped it with both hands. Steam curled upward, soft against her face. She closed her eyes as if the warmth itself was a kind of peace she had not felt in a long time. Stefan knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I need to know if you are hurt anywhere," he said. "Can you show me?" She opened her eyes and slowly lifted her right arm. A thin, red scrape ran along her forearm, swollen from exposure to the cold. She looked at him as if asking permission before letting him examine it. Stefan nodded gently. "May I?" She blinked once. "Yes." He cleaned the cut with warm water, careful not to startle her. She did not flinch when the cloth touched her skin. Instead, she watched him with an intensity that felt both cautious and curious. It struck him how she did not waste her movements. Every gesture she made was intentional, quiet, and deeply aware. When he wrapped the bandage around her arm, she looked down at the neat white strip, then looked at Aster, who was curled at her feet. Her hand reached down to stroke the dog's fur. Aster closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "You have a way with him," Stefan said softly. "He usually takes a long time to trust strangers." She looked at Stefan again. There was no pride in her gaze, no surprise. It was as though kindness came naturally to her, even in her exhaustion. Stefan rose to his feet. "I do not know your name," he said, "but you are safe here. You can rest. No one will disturb you." Her eyes softened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, water-damaged notebook. She opened it to a blank page and wrote slowly, her handwriting graceful but trembling. "Thank you." Stefan exhaled, something tight loosening inside his chest at the sight of that single word. He met her eyes again, and the connection felt immediate, silent, and strangely familiar. Like grief recognizing grief. "You are welcome," he said. The storm rumbled outside, but inside the cabin, the world held stillness. The kind that felt like the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. The morning arrived quietly, with soft sunlight dripping through the cabin windows like warm honey. Stefan had dozed off in the armchair near the fireplace, boots still on, a blanket half draped over him. He woke to the gentle sound of movement. Light, careful steps, the kind taken by someone who did not want to disturb anything around her. The young woman was standing near the window, wrapped in the wool blanket, her long hair falling like a dark curtain down her back. She watched the forest with the stillness of a deer listening for danger. Aster sat beside her, tail flicking lazily against the floor, fully at ease in her presence. Stefan rose slowly, giving her space. "Good morning," he said. She turned. Her expression held a question, not in her eyes alone, but in the way her posture shifted. She lifted the notebook she had held last night and wrote something before turning it toward him. "Is this your home?" "Yes," Stefan answered. "At least for now. I come here when I need to think, or when the city feels too loud." She nodded softly, as if she understood the weight behind the words. She pressed the pencil down again. "Thank you for letting me stay. I can leave soon." Stefan shook his head. "You do not have to leave yet. Your body needs warmth, and your arm needs to heal. I do not want you walking back into that forest alone. She hesitated, and for a brief second he saw fear flicker across her eyes. Fear of dismissal, fear of being a burden, fear of being told she was not welcome. She had probably experienced all three. You are safe here, he added gently. As long as you need. Her shoulders relaxed by a fraction. Stefan walked to the kitchen counter and prepared breakfast. He kept his movements slow and steady, not wanting to startle her. The smell of scrambled eggs and toasted bread filled the room. She watched quietly, her gaze not prying, just observing the world with a patient awareness that felt strange and soothing. When he brought the food to the table, she approached but did not sit right away. She waited for a signal. Stefan pulled out a chair. Please, he said. Only then did she sit. Astor rested his head on her knee, earning a small, tender smile from her. She ate with careful, deliberate bites, as if savoring each piece of warmth inside her chest. Stefan finally said what had been on his mind since the night before. I want to help you, he said, but I do not know what you need unless you tell me in your way. You can write, or gesture, or point, but I will listen. She froze for a moment, not afraid, but fragile. Her fingers curled around the pencil. Slowly, she wrote, most people say that. They do not mean it. Stefan did not look away. I mean it. Astor nudged her again. She looked down at the dog, then back at Stefan, and he saw a small spark of trust form in her eyes. Not a large one. Not enough to change everything. But something new. Something real. She wrote again. I believe you. Astor does too. Stefan let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He sat across from her, elbows resting lightly on the table. I would like to know your name, he said. She hesitated for a long moment. Then she wrote, with careful strokes, Eliana. The name lingered in the air like a soft chord from a memory. Stefan repeated it in his mind, committing it to something deeper than thought. Eliana, he said aloud, and she looked up as if hearing her name carried more meaning than sound. He added gently, I am Stefan. The moment settled between them, quiet and fragile and honest. Outside the cabin, the forest breathed with morning light. Inside, two strangers sat at a wooden table, one learning how to speak again, and the other learning how to listen. And for the first time in years, Stefan felt something inside him shift, like grief making room for something softer. The morning stretched into early afternoon, and the cabin settled into a steady, comforting quiet. Eliana moved slowly, as if testing the space for safety, while Stefan kept a respectful distance, letting her set the rhythm. Every so often, Astor brushed against her leg, guiding her like a silent guardian. By midday, the rain outside softened to a mist. Sunlight filtered through the wet branches, scattering small reflections across the windows. Eliana stood near the doorway, blankets still draped around her shoulders, watching the woods as if trying to decide whether they still belonged to her. Stefan approached from the kitchen with 2 mugs of warm herbal tea. It is calmer out there today, he said gently, but the ground is still slippery. If you want to step outside, I can walk with you. Eliana looked down at her notebook, hesitating. Then she wrote something slowly, turning it toward him. I want to see the forest. I know it better than any place. Stefan nodded. Then I will walk with you. She held his gaze for a moment, searching for any sign of hesitation or control. When she found none, she wrapped the blanket tighter and stepped outside with him. Astor bounded ahead in a playful half-circle, as if welcoming her back into her own world. The forest looked different in daylight. Drops of rain clung to the pine needles, sparkling like tiny crystals. The air smelled of earth and moss. Eliana closed her eyes and breathed in, chest expanding with slow, deliberate control. Stefan watched her, realizing she was steadying herself in the only language she had. They walked along a soft trail, their steps in rhythm. Eliana pointed at a cluster of mushrooms and then tapped her notebook, writing, These only grow after heavy rain. They show the trail is alive. Stefan smiled. You know the forest well. She paused, then wrote again. I lived out here a long time. It is quiet. The quiet does not hurt me. Her wording struck him. She did not fear silence the way he did. Silence had become a home for her, while it had become a prison for him. They continued deeper into the woods, stopping near a shallow stream. The water slid over smooth stones with a gentle murmur. Eliana crouched down and placed her fingertips against the surface, feeling the cold ripple. Her face softened, as if this place understood her the way words never did. Stefan stepped beside her. Were you alone out here the whole time? She did not write immediately. Instead, she closed her notebook, staring at the stream for a long moment. When she finally wrote, the words were smaller. Yes, alone is safer than misunderstood. Stefan felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that feeling too well. Believing solitude was better than being known and dismissed. Before he could speak, Aster suddenly barked once, sharply. He turned toward the trail they had come from, body tense. Eliana stiffened. Her hand tightened around the blanket. Stefan looked around, scanning the trees. The forest was quiet, but not in a natural way. A stillness had settled over the clearing, the kind that comes when something is approaching. It is all right, Stefan said softly, though he was not fully sure. It is probably a deer. Eliana shook her head, her eyes tracking something unseen. She touched Stefan's sleeve and pointed toward a narrow path that looped back. Toward the cabin, a more sheltered route. He understood. We can head back. As they walked, Aster stayed close to Eliana's side, ears pricked, protective. The tension eased only when the cabin came back into view through the trees. Once inside, Eliana's posture relaxed by a notch, though the question remained in her expression. Stefan shut the door behind them. You sensed something before I did, he said. Do you know this forest well enough to tell when something is wrong? She wrote immediately. When you live in silence, you hear everything. Some sounds do not belong. He nodded slowly, understanding the truth under her words. Her silence was not a weakness. It was a skill, a shield, a way of perceiving the world more deeply than most people ever could. Stefan sat across from her as she set the notebook on her lap. The fire crackled softly between them. Eliana, he said quietly, I want to understand the life you had before last night. Only when you are ready. Her pencil hovered over the page. For the first time, she did not write. Instead, she lifted her eyes to his, steady, fragile, and brave. Her silence spoke louder than any sentence. The evening settled gently over the cabin, dimming the world to soft amber light. The forest outside had grown quiet again, but something in Eliana's expression told Stefan that silence meant more to her than simple peace. It carried memories. It carried wounds. She sat near the fire now, notebook in her hands, the flicker of the flames reflecting in her eyes. Stefan kept his voice low. You do not have to tell me everything today, but I want you to know that you are allowed to speak in whatever way feels safe for you, even if it is only through writing. Eliana looked down at the notebook. Her fingers pressed into the cover before she opened it and began to write. Her movements were steady, though he sensed a tremor in her breath. She turned the page toward him. People tried to fix me. I did not want to be fixed. I wanted to be heard. Stefan felt the words settle heavy in the air. They were not dramatic. They were not loud. But they were true. He sat on the floor near her chair, keeping the fire between them so she did not feel cornered. Aster lay beside her feet again, as if claiming her as part of his small, chosen circle. I hear you, Stefan said quietly. I promise you that. Her eyes flickered up at him, a small spark of trust slowly building. She closed the notebook for a moment, holding it against her chest, grounding herself. Stefan waited, not pressing, not leading, just offering the kind of space he wished someone had given him years ago. Finally, Eliana opened the notebook again and wrote another line. I was in an accident. After that, I could not speak. My family did not understand. They thought silence meant something was wrong with me. She paused, breathing through the weight of the memory. They sent me to a place where people talked at me, not to me. I left and came here. I needed the quiet. Stefan's jaw tightened, not with anger toward her, but with the bitterness of knowing how badly people could misjudge what they did not understand. Eliana, he said softly, you did what you needed to survive. There is nothing wrong with that. Her throat moved in a swallow, and her eyes softened as if his words reached a place she rarely let anyone touch. She wrote again, her handwriting smaller this time. You are the first person who listens without expecting something back. Stefan's breath caught. He had never been praised for listening. People usually praised him for winning, leading, building, conquering. But listening had always been the one thing that mattered most to him, even when he struggled to speak his own pain. The fire cracked, sending up a spark that briefly illuminated the quiet bond building between them. Stefan shifted slightly closer. There is something I should tell you too, he said. My sister died 7 years ago. I tried to save her, but I could not. Ever since then, I have been trying to outrun the noise in my head. But nothing helped. Nothing quieted it. Eliana lifted her gaze to him, and for the first time, she reached out gently and touched the back of his hand. Her fingers were light, hesitant, but intentional. A gesture of understanding, not pity. Stefan felt something inside his chest loosen, as if her silence understood the shape of his grief better than any words could. She picked up her pencil again. Your grief is loud because it mattered. Mine is silent, because I learned to hide it. But they are both real. He exhaled slowly, overwhelmed by the truth she carried in such few words. She placed the notebook on the arm of the chair and touched her chest lightly, then his hand again. A gesture that told him she saw him. She understood him. She recognized the fracture lines inside him because they mirrored her own. The firelight warmed the room in a way that felt almost sacred. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Two wounded people sat across from each other, letting the quiet do what words never could. Aster lifted his head and gently rested it on Eliana's knee. She smiled, small but real. A smile that carried both gratitude and courage. And in that moment, Stefan realized something with sudden clarity. This was the first time in years that silence did not feel like a threat. It felt like healing. The morning after their shared confessions arrived quietly, wrapped in the soft glow of winter sunlight filtering through the cabin windows. Stefan woke before Eliana, though he stayed still for a moment, listening to the gentle rhythm of the forest outside and the even gentler sound of her breathing from the armchair near the fire. Aster lay curled beside her, as if he had taken it upon himself to guard her through the night. Stefan rose slowly, careful not to disturb her, and stepped into the kitchen. The simple act of making tea felt different today. Lighter, less like a routine to fill silence, and more like something meaningful. Something shared. When the kettle began to hum, Eliana stirred. Her eyes opened softly, taking in her surroundings with a moment of quiet uncertainty before she remembered where she was. Then she relaxed. Her shoulders eased. The anxiety that usually flashed in her eyes each time she woke somewhere unfamiliar did not appear. Aster stretched, nudged her hand, and wagged his tail. Good morning, Stefan said gently, carrying a mug toward her. You slept well. She nodded once, accepting the tea with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her palms. Her long hair was slightly tousled, falling in waves around her shoulders. She wrapped the blanket closer and looked at Stefan with a depth he could not name. Trust, perhaps, or the first hint of safety. He sat across from her, keeping his movements unhurried. I was thinking, he said slowly, that we could take a short walk today, just around the property. No pressure, but it might help us both breathe a little easier. Eliana considered this. Her fingers moved toward the notebook, but she stopped halfway. Instead, she lifted her gaze and nodded. A small, steady yes. They stepped outside a few minutes later, dressed warmly in coats Stefan had lent her. The forest was still damp from the storm, but the sun broke through in slender beams, touching the branches with gold. The air felt clean, like a new beginning. Eliana walked beside Stefan with careful steps, staying close to Aster. She did not cling, but she stayed within reach, a silent acknowledgement that she trusted him enough to let him guide her through the woods. They reached a ridge overlooking the valley, where the mist curled like soft smoke along the treetops. Eliana paused, placing her hand on a moss-covered tree trunk. Her expression shifted, something between awe and memory. Stefan watched her for a moment. This place seems familiar to you, he said quietly. She opened her notebook and wrote, This is where I sit when the world feels too heavy. Stefan nodded, understanding more than he expected to. It makes sense, he said. This place feels like it holds things for you. Things you cannot carry alone. She looked at him, surprised by his insight. Then her pencil moved again. Sometimes the forest listens better than people. Stefan exhaled slowly. I understand that more than you know. They walked a little farther, reaching a small clearing where fallen leaves formed a soft bed underfoot. Eliana stopped suddenly. Her posture stiffened. Her eyes scanned the surrounding trees, focused and sharp. Aster let out a low growl. Stefan stepped in front of her without thinking, not as a shield but as an instinct. What is it? He asked softly. Eliana pointed toward a patch of earth near the edge of the clearing. A single set of footprints, not theirs, not fresh, but recent enough to unsettle her, pressed into the mud. Whoever had passed through this part of the forest had been here within the last day. Her pencil moved quickly this time. Someone else came here. That was not you. That was not me. Stefan studied the tracks. You have been living alone out here, he said. Did anyone ever follow you before? Eliana's grip tightened around the notebook. She wrote only one word, but it carried a storm of fear beneath it. Yes. Stefan felt a shift inside him, protective, fierce, and immediate. You are not alone this time, he said. Whoever came through here, I will find out. And you do not have to face it by yourself. Her eyes lifted to his, fragile and brave all at once. Then something unexpected happened. She reached out and touched his forearm. Not by accident, not out of fear, but as a choice. A silent admission that she believed him. Aster pressed against her side, sensing her rising tension and easing it with his weight. The three of them stood together in the clearing, forming a small, unlikely circle against the world. Stefan spoke softly. We will go back to the cabin. We will figure out the rest from there. Eliana nodded, but her eyes lingered on the footprints, her expression tightening, not just with fear, but with recognition. She knew something Stefan did not, and whatever it was coming closer. The walk back to the cabin was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet Eliana usually found comfort in. This silence was tight, stretched thin by fear she was trying hard to hide. Aster stayed glued to her side, every muscle alert. Stefan noticed the way her steps grew smaller, her gaze scanning the trees with practiced caution. Whoever had left those footprints, she knew them, or she knew what they represented. Inside the cabin, Stefan added wood to the fire while Eliana sat on the edge of the armchair, her notebook clutched like a lifeline. Her breathing was steady, but her hands were not. She opened the notebook and wrote quickly, the pencil pressing harder than usual. I knew someone might find me. I hoped it would not happen this soon. Stefan crouched beside her. Who are we dealing with? Her answer came slowly, each word shaped by memory. My family hired people to bring me back. They think silence is a condition. They do not understand it is protection. Stefan felt his jaw tighten. You ran for a reason. And whoever is searching for you is not acting out of concern. She nodded, confirming what he already sensed. Then she wrote again. They want control, not healing, not understanding. Aster let out a faint growl, almost as if agreeing. Eliana stroked his fur to calm him, but her touch carried its own trembling. Stefan spoke gently. Eliana, I want you to hear this clearly. No one is taking you anywhere. Not now. Not ever. You are not property. You do not owe them your voice. Her breath hitched. She wrote one more sentence, slower this time. I do not want to be taken back. I cannot survive that again. Stefan felt something inside him lock into place. Protectiveness sharpened by the memory of his own failure to protect someone he loved. Not again. Not this time. Not her. He rose to his feet. I am going to make sure this place is secure. Doors, windows, perimeter. You and Aster stay close to the fire. Eliana stood abruptly and caught his sleeve. Her eyes held both urgency and something deeper, a plea not to be left alone, not even for a few minutes. Her fingers tightened around his arm, a silent confession of the fear she rarely displayed. Stefan softened. All right, he said. We will check it together. They moved through the cabin slowly. Stefan tested the locks while Eliana watched the tree lean beyond the windows. Aster followed them from room to room, refusing to let her out of his sight. When they reached the back porch, a sudden crack echoed through the woods, a branch snapping under weight. Eliana froze. Aster stepped forward, fur rising along his back. Stefan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. We are going inside. They backed away from the door. Eliana wrote with quick, sharp movements. They are close. They know this place. Stefan read her words and felt the air shift around them. Her fear was not imagination. It was recognition. He moved closer to her, lowering his voice. Eliana, look at me. She did. We handle this together. You are not alone now. Her eyes glistened with a soft, fierce vulnerability. She nodded once, trusting him with the kind of trust people only give when they have run out of places to flee. The night pressed in around the cabin as the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of footsteps, real, deliberate, and getting closer. The wind pressed harder against the cabin walls as night settled in. The sound of footsteps from the forest had faded, but the tension it left behind stayed thick in the air. Eliana paced near the fireplace, her hands shaking as she clutched her notebook. Aster stood between her and the door, sensing every spike of fear in her body. Stefan returned from checking the porch once more, jaw tight but movements calm. He looked at Eliana, then at the closed notebook she held to her chest like a shield. "They have not reached the cabin," he said quietly. "But they will not stop searching. Not if they believe they have a claim on you." Eliana opened the notebook with trembling fingers and wrote quickly. "They will not understand. They will take me. Silence is dangerous to them." Stefan knelt beside her, his voice steady. "Eliana, listen to me. No one is taking you anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever again." Her breath stuttered. Her eyes glistened. She shook her head once, not in disagreement, but in disbelief. People had promised things before. People had failed her before. Stefan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small harmonica he always carried. The metal glinted in the firelight. He held it between them, not playing it, just letting her see it. "This," he said slowly, "is the only thing my sister left me. When I play it, I feel like she can hear me somewhere. Like my voice reaches beyond the noise." He placed the harmonica gently into her hands. It was warm from his touch. "You have a language too," Stefan said. "A real one. One that does not need fixing. If your silence is how you speak, then teach me how to hear you." Her throat tightened. She touched the harmonica with shaky fingertips, then held it close to her chest. Aster nudged her, sensing the shift in her breathing. Stefan moved a little closer, careful, steady. "Eliana," he whispered, "I will stay. I will not leave you to face them alone." She wrote slowly now, every stroke deliberate. "Why would you do this for me?" Stefan looked at her, grief softening his features. "Because you remind me that silence does not mean emptiness. And because you listen to my pain the way no one else ever has." Her eyes widened. She had not expected honesty that gentle. Outside, another branch snapped. A shadow passed near the tree-line. Eliana flinched, instinctively stepping back. Stefan rose and stepped in front of her, a protective motion that came from somewhere deeper than thought. "Eliana," he said, not turning from the window, "we are done running." He took the notebook from her hands and wrote a single line across the page. "You are safe. I promise." Eliana stared at the words. Her breath caught, then broke in a trembling exhale. She reached for him, fingers brushing his sleeve before resting over his hand. For her, this was a declaration. A surrender of fear, a trust she had not given anyone in years. The forest outside grew still again. The danger had not vanished, but something stronger had formed in its place. A bond, a choice. Eliana looked at Stefan, tears gathering silently in her eyes. And then, with her entire body trembling, she released the smallest sound, a soft, breath-like syllable, barely more than a whisper. It was not a word, not even a voice. But it was the first sound she had allowed herself to make in a very long time. Stefan heard it, and it broke something open inside him. He reached for her hand. "We face this together," he said. Eliana nodded, breathing through the fear, holding on to the one truth that finally felt real. She was not alone anymore. The night passed slowly, but no one came to the cabin. The footsteps in the forest never returned. And by morning the danger that had pressed against the walls like a cold breath had settled into silence again. A quiet, waiting silence. Eliana slept near the fire, Aster curled against her, while Stefan remained awake in the armchair, watching over both of them with a steady resolve he had not known he possessed. When sunlight finally slipped through the windows, warm and golden, Stefan rose and stepped outside. The forest looked washed clean after the storm, the air crisp, the sky a pale, gentle blue. Something inside him shifted. He knew what he needed to do. He returned to the cabin and found Eliana awake, blanket around her shoulders. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. "It is time," Stefan said softly. "Not to run, not to hide, but to choose what you want next. And whatever you choose, I will stand beside you." Eliana tightened the blanket, fear flickering behind her expression, but she reached for her notebook and wrote carefully. "I do not want to be taken away. I want a life where my silence is allowed." Stefan nodded. "Then I will make sure of it. Legally, publicly, permanently." She stared at him, eyes widening with a mixture of disbelief and hope. But Stefan was already moving. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, documents he had drawn up during the early hours of the morning. He placed them gently in her hands. "These are legal protections," he explained. If anyone searches for you again, they will be required to go through me. And I will not allow anyone to take you somewhere you do not want to go. Eliana's hands trembled as she traced the edge of the papers. This was the kind of protection no one had ever given her. Protection based on choice, not control. Her breathing hitched, and she wrote slowly. Why would you do this for me? Truly? Stefan sat beside her. Astor rested his head on her knee, adding a soft reassurance of his own. Because, Stefan said, his voice steady. You showed me something I have not felt in years. That even silence can heal. That pain can find its way out when someone is willing to sit in it with you. You gave me something real, Eliana. Something honest. Her eyes glistened. She pressed her hand to her chest, then reached out and touched Stefan's cheek with trembling fingers. It was the softest gesture, but it carried the weight of everything she could not say aloud. Stefan stood and walked to the small wooden table by the window. He opened a velvet box and returned with something shining in his palm, a simple silver ring. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud, just honest and steady, like everything she had brought into his life. He knelt, not with fanfare, not with grand speeches, but with quiet intention. Eliana, he said, I do not want a life filled with noise anymore. I want one filled with meaning, with truth, with you. Marry me. No speeches, no pressure. Just stay beside me, in whatever way you choose. Eliana covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. She reached for her notebook, but after a long moment, she set it aside. Instead, she nodded. A full, trembling, wholehearted yes. Stefan placed the ring on her finger, and she let out another soft breath, an almost sound, fragile and precious. Astor barked once, as if blessing the moment. Stefan drew her into his arms, careful and gentle, holding her the way someone holds something sacred. Outside, the forest stood quiet, no longer a refuge or a hiding place, but the beginning of a life neither of them had expected. Two souls, one silent and one shattered, choosing each other not through words, but through healing. The life ahead of them would not be loud, but it would be theirs.